I do know I can get into my meeting though, and that's really all that matters.
And you want me to make up
I sent him
your
a,
agenda?
yeah, actually,
Okay, I'll go grab that.
hold on, pencil in, because then I'll write instead of type. And then I'm gonna type it in. If I turn my phone to silent.
Okay, hang on a minute. I'll be right back. Just got to make one quick copy for Rachel and then we'll get started.
Got everybody, we got Ashley, Mary, Katie. I think we're still short some board members. There's no Sue tonight. But Jim and, I see Jim and Amy are missing yet. I guess there are 4 of us though.
We're missing our students as well. Are they coming tonight?
Are the students coming tonight, Matt? Do you know?
I believe them. I told them that we're virtual, so they should be coming. They might not be able to make the
Work session?
work session, but I see there's a few other people here, so.
Matt, do we know if, is Amy on now? Rachel, oh, I see Amy Johnson. And then Jim, not yet.
Here's Jim.
And Jim is on. All right, it looks like everybody who's gonna be here is going or is on.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Pretty well, okay. Then we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Well, now we'll call the meeting in order, so we're being recorded. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Jenny, I'll make that motion.
And a second?
I'll second this, Corey.
All right. And roll,
Everything is roll call.
everything is roll call. So we'll let Paul do his job.
Okay, Ms. Deppa,
Aye.
Mr. Black.
Aye.
Ms. Froznell,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Seguin,
Aye.
Mr. Gierke,
Aye.
Ms. Roser.
And Sue is not going to be present tonight. And so the motion passes 6-0. All right, now we can begin. Unless there's something.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
Get the-
Begin the work session.
Yep.
All right, first topic is the LLCC grade annual trip.
Yes, and we have Katie Thompson here, who's going to share some information. I did share in my Friday email from last week what Katie has shared with me regarding, the Long Lake Conservation Center. And so I'll turn it over to Katie, and if there's anything you want to add to it, share to it. It's kind of exciting to bring the trip back.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'll just share a little bit about our upcoming trip to LLCC. Like Matt said, we're really excited that we get to do this again with our kids. It's been a couple of years since we've been able to go. So you've seen the notes that I sent over. So just as an overview, this will be for our 6th graders. They're going April 4th through the 6th. So it's 2 nights overnight up in LLCC. They all kind of caravan up there on buses, and then they're put up in some sleeping arrangements and some rooms. And then their days are fully scheduled and planned by the team up at LLCC in coordination with our 6th grade teachers. They kind of communicate about, what are the classes we want our kids to participate in and some of those things. So they're in classes and doing activities all day from 8:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, which is honestly about my bedtime. So I'm tired just thinking about it. But they just get to do a lot of really cool outside hands-on learning. The focus is really on that environmental education. there are some principles that they have up there, and I'll just share those with you real quick. So the LLCC, kind of their values and what they hope for all of the kids who visit there is just teaching respect for self, for others, and then for our earth. They value a lot of hands-on active learning. They teach about a wise use of our resources. They encourage sustainable lifestyles, and then they just overall encourage, having fun. And so obviously I'm new to the district without a lot of background, but from what I've heard, this is one of those things that kids just kind of hold on to as part of their memories, all the way through they graduate and they have memories from this trip. So we're excited to get to do that. We have sent out our permission slips. There is the option to do some fundraising for kids who want to do that. But we'll do whatever we need to do so that money isn't a barrier for anyone who wants to attend. So let's see. That's kind of the overview of it. Do you guys have any specific questions or anything you're wondering about with the trip? I'll do my best to answer.
Is the plan to stay with 6th grade going forward?
I think for the time being, yes, 5th grade did it for a long time. And my understanding is it just kind of became one of those things where it's a big undertaking for teachers. It's a pretty big commitment, and 5th grade was ready to share that commitment for a little bit. So it'll be with 6th grade for a while. And then I don't know if it'll shift back, but they just kind of were ready to let someone else do all that organizing and planning for a little bit. So, and I think it's good to move it to 6th grade. It's kind of one of those, you're older, it's your last year, kind of hurrah for them. So should work out.
This may be a dumb question and really may not be directly for Katie, but is there any opportunity for us to look at our 7th graders going, since they completely missed out on it?
Yeah, I guess I couldn't really speak to that, but I know they're the one group, they missed it. So yeah, I don't know.
That would have to be broached with Barry, I would assume, at the high school. I don't know exactly what, the LLCC trip, how does that work with age level of kids? And I'm sure they've got some programming, but I could check in with Barry on that to see if they're interested now that they're in the high school.
I don't want a ton of work to be put into it, but I do hear that more often than not, that, they completely missed the opportunity, which a lot of things happen in COVID, but if there were a chance, it would be interesting to see if we could make that happen.
Sure, I'll check in with Barry.
Any other questions for Katie?
So the timing of this is we work sessioned it today, tonight, and then I'll have it on its new business under board action for the February school board meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Sounds good. Thank you, Katie. All right. And then moving on, the China Costa Rica trip, and Ashley Johnson is on for that one.
Hi guys, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. So I am here to propose another form of a trip. I've spoken to you guys a few times about the China trip in DC, New York. And, given the current circumstances with COVID, specifically also in Asia and China, and just the policies they still have in place, I think that's just going to be, it's not doable. So when I was going to either cancel the trip or I was not going to postpone again, I don't think that word can be in my vocabulary for a while. I did have some other families reach out that were signed up for the trip that were interested in some kind of student travel, which I was very excited about. So I reached back out to World Strides, and they kind of gave me a list of trips that would be doable, that will be partnered up with other schools just because of the size of our group. And Costa Rica was the winner, which I'm very excited about. The itinerary looks awesome. So our travel dates would be June 13th through the 23rd. It's 10 days. Right now we have 8 students that are ready to go for Costa Rica. Like they finalized, they're in. So knock on wood, given any other we will be going, and pending your guys' approval, I should say. And then it will be myself and another teacher, Andrew Waldbelag, was signed up to go to China. So he's going to continue being the other teacher that Delano brings. And then we do also have a parent that is signed up to go with their child, which was an option for when we proposed China. So there'll be 8 or 11 total travelers when you think of the students and the adults. We have a lot of cool opportunities with this trip. They do have some LEAP experiences, which is it's called learning through experiences and activities, participation, like active participation. So we'll be doing on a day where we're cooking authentic food. We will be spending a day in a school or part of a day in a school and kind of, immersing ourselves in some of those opportunities to make it more of an authentic experience for them, as well as national parks, volcanoes, a lot of really cool things. So I'm excited about it. That's as much as I have right now. I'm meeting with our account manager in a couple weeks to go over some more details regarding COVID and travel with vaccines. But it's Costa Rica right now. They are not requiring vaccinated travelers. You just have to have either, if you're vaccinated, a health pass, which I used all throughout Europe this past summer, which was very easy, and unvaccinated just need proof of insurance. So I'm not sure if World Strides will have different parameters around that, but that is going to be something we discuss in our meeting in a couple weeks. So do you guys have any specific questions that I can answer?
Is there a policy if they choose to back out or they close it down on us?
Yep. So there's already been students who've had to do that with the China, the amount of times we've had to postpone. And then when we switched over to Costa Rica, there were a few people who were just not interested. And I totally understood. So when they signed up originally for China, they had an opportunity to buy it's like a refund program, and students who purchased that is applicable during this. Now, if something happens where World Strides has to call it because of safety or health reasons, which they're constantly looking at and reevaluating, that same policy goes into place. And I believe even they're more generous for the people who may not have purchased that, because they're the ones that are making that decision. So,
Okay.
I would like to understand, as you kind of meet about the travel, what would happen coming back? Like, do students have to be tested to get back into the country? And if they, for whatever reason, test positive, because I have no doubt this is still going to be going on, right? Like, we could all cross our fingers, but I'd like to understand, what does that mean? Can they, if they were to test positive to get back in, what happens then?
Yep. So good question. So anyone traveling right now has to test to get back into the country. So they will be scheduling PCR tests in order for us to arrive back in the United States. And knock on wood, crossing fingers, pending that they're all negative, everything goes as planned. And the specifics around if there's a positive, I'm not sure, since it switched from China to Costa Rica. That's something that we're going to be discussing, but I would imagine it would be very similar. And that's why I feel very comfortable bringing 2 teachers, because if something were to happen, I would be the one staying back, or depending the circumstance, like if it's an asymptomatic student and it's going to, it all kind of depends on the quarantine, if I'm the one staying with. And I think that's why they want that proof of health insurance aspect, knowing that if that happens, things go in place. I also would like to think that World Strides has some kind of policy in regards to if a student tests positive, what they would cover and what they would put up. Like, they have policies in place of like a hotel that they would have that like already available. So if and when I have to call and say I have a positive student, they have a location of a hotel that we would use. They have contacts on the ground in every country that they have trips. So they've really reassured me. I'm bringing students to DC, New York this March still. And that has been a common talking point in all my meetings with the account managers for that trip as well, of if and when this happens, what do I have to do? And that's just more or less if someone gets sick, because we don't need a test leaving New York. But I am very, which is kind of a shock, comfortable, I feel like, taking students right now because of my confidence in World Strides. So that makes me feel better. I think if I wasn't comfortable with our conversations, I wouldn't want to go, because I don't want to risk something like that happening. So that will all be conversations we're continuing to have in the next couple weeks.
Awesome. Sounds great. And I think the other thing would just be who, if it happens, who covers that cost?
Yeah.
Right.
Is it a parent related cost? Is it school cost? What does that mean if all of a sudden you're quarantined in the country then for 10 days or whatever it may be?
Yep. So, and that's something that we'll go over. So like I said, I think that with the proof of health insurance, I want to say that probably is going to have something to play in. I think that's why they want that. So I would imagine part of our conversation with my families when we have meetings before we go is, here's our plan if this happens. I have access to all of that, insurance information. And then I would be the one kind of given the directive of, okay, if a student tests positive, we go, this is who covers it. World Strides maybe just does a hotel, or we cover, like they'll have to cover food. I'm not sure. So that's definitely something that's going to be a conversation that I have. And then once I do have that conversation, it will be absolutely immediately put out to our families so they can understand that process. So if they don't feel comfortable, they can then make a decision to cancel.
Awesome.
Yeah, Jenny, I'm glad that I had the same almost exact questions that you have. So thank you for asking that. I think for me, Ashley, it's different to be traveling within the United States with the students, but obviously I just have a heightened sense of uneasiness going outside of the country with students.
Yep.
And some of those risks and liabilities are just concerning to me. And
Absolutely.
so I like that you have a plan. I like that your plan includes if a student has to sit, like somebody is with that student, that they are not left in a country, by themselves, like not that would have ever been the case. But so that makes me feel a little better. I would also be curious to know what their just contingency plans are. Not that we would hope that this would happen again, but what if they close the borders just period? Like you're there and something happens and then your entire group is now there. Like some of those things I would just want to understand kind of what some of those plans are, not that.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. And what I can do too is see if I can meet with our account. The account manager I typically work with is on maternity leave. So I've just been introduced to our new one that will be taking over for her. And I can try and get more specific detailed information sooner and send the board out an email. That's why I do feel better traveling with another teacher. So if and when, I also would probably imagine that if the world or Costa Rica was in a place where they were talking about closing a border, we wouldn't go. So they have constant health officials in every country that they travel with, that they work with their company in assessing this current situation. So, I mean, even DC, New York could get to the point where 3 weeks before we go to New York, it's just, in a place. And that's something that they're constantly assessing. So I would hope that if they would have a random a shutdown, we would know before we got on that airplane. But those are all very fair.
Yeah, I mean, our concerns obviously are liabilities to the
Absolutely.
district. As long as it's very, very clear that the district is not liable in any way, shape, or form, then that liability goes back onto the families that are signing up for the trip. I think that's important.
And they do sign waivers. So I have even health and safety waivers that go out for DC, New York. So they all sign saying, because gosh, even if a student were to roll an ankle in DC and need medical assistance, those are all things that are kind of signed off on and agreeing that, the district's not liable to pay for that urgent care bill, et cetera. So.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Ashley, once you find that information, you can just share it with me. I can send it out in my Thursday email every week. So
Yes, absolutely.
completely, I can help facilitate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Any other questions I can try and answer?
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you, Ashley. And next we go to the district pay equity report, and that will be Mary and Jenny.
Sorry, see the top of my head tonight. Jenny should be popping on here pretty quick. There she is.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I did link it to the work session, so I wasn't sure if we wanted to bring that up or not. It is also, the two reports were also linked to the regular board agenda as well. But we were just going to look at the compliance report this evening. Jenny was the one who completed this and we worked on it together, but I wasn't sure. Jenny, do you want to go through it or do you want me to kind of talk about it?
I mean, I don't know what specific questions you guys have, but we were in compliance in all the different categories. So everything, I think it's all linked there what our scores were. So everything looked good from our end and everything got submitted correctly. So I don't know if you guys have specific questions on this.
I don't have specific questions, but if you could just walk us through what everything means, I would like a little bit of just a little bit of an explanation of what all this stuff means.
Yeah, so you just have to go through each group and you can kind of see how the class titles. So you go through each group and you give their minimum wage and their maximum wage. And then included in those, it's a little confusing. So if a male group is, if the benefit is higher, and Mary, you might be able to explain this better since you've done it a few times, but then you add in all the insurance benefits, which will also go into what their max salary would be. Cash in lieu comes into effect. So it's just a lot of calculating and just making sure that we're all within, that we have a fair wage throughout our employee groups.
Yep. So on the compliance report, they've got the general job classes where it shows the male groups, the female classes, and then how those, then they take those and do the statistical analysis. And under letter A, the underpayment ratio, we're at 105.7292. As long as we're over 80%, we're in compliance. So then we don't have to look at the t-test results, but it's just saying that we've got enough groups that are at or above the predicted pay rate between the males and females that we are in compliance. If you're under 80%, that means that you've got way too many female groups that are being underpaid compared to your male groups. But as it is, we're doing well. Then we go down to the salary range test number 3. Again, that needs to be 80% or above. And we're at almost 117%. And that's just looking at how long it takes groups to get to the top step or the maximum pay level. And then it's to be equitable between your males and females. So it takes, for most of our female centric groups, it takes 8 years to get to the top level. And then with the male groups, it's 10. And then they look at exceptional pay test, which is number 4. We're at almost 159%. And that's just the number of male groups and female groups that are getting exceptional pay. And exceptional pay is longevity, career increments, performance pay, those types of things. So we were able to bring that into a couple other groups the last contract go around in community ed, which really increased that percentage on that particular section. But overall, the district is in compliance.
And is the definition of a male class or a female class just the gender that dominates a particular?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Any other questions for Mary and Jenny?
This will be on, this is obviously, as you know, on the board agenda because there's a deadline where we've got to get this report approved by the board to the Department of Education.
Yep, January 31st is the deadline, and we just got notified of this, at the end of November that it was due. So we got it done as quickly as we could. So sorry for the short turnaround.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. And students did that. Student school board rep selection process. This was brought up by Jim, and it's a discussion he started, and see where we're at with it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't ask to put it back on the work session. I had kind of forgot about it, but it basically was have a similar selection process up until the final selection, and then make it a voted position by the student body. So obviously a candidate would have to go through the same process of interviews and write an essay and be qualified, highly regarded in their class, but then the final selection goes to a voting.
Matt, are grades a part of that process of who can apply for that position or not?
Yeah, so and this is why it's good we have John that's on here too. He's been through the process and he can give his opinion too on how he thinks that would go. So basically, Jim, what you're saying is that we would follow the same process. And what we do is it's every year it's a sophomore that would be chosen. Then they become a junior the next year. And so we do an announcement to every sophomore if they're wanting to be a part of the process, they can. I do an informational meeting of any interested sophomore students and kind of walk through that whole process. And then we give them a deadline to apply. They actually apply on the website, same as any other employee of the district. And then from there, we usually have anywhere from, I'd say 5 to 10 applicants that go to and make the application per the policy. And then there's usually a couple of board members, myself, usually representative of high school counselors and administrators. And then also the soon-to-be senior school board representative is there as well. So that would be Lila would be next. And then the question would be, is I think what you're talking about, Jim, is after that process, you would then facilitate an election. Whoever applied, everybody who applies gets to interview. And so if any of those that interview, we would just facilitate a ballot. Now, my question would be on logistics. Would you facilitate the ballot in that particular grade, or would you open it up to the school? I don't know. That's something that, you guys, when we talked about this last month, you just, Jim, you broached it and we just said, let's agree to spend a little bit more time at the next school board meeting.
Sure.
So we just have to figure out those logistics. And John, I don't know what you think about that.
It was kind of almost a typical application that you'd make for a job where you fill out like have like a resume sort of thing. And I think it's good the way it was. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think you do want to improve if you have the opportunity. And I think what I've discussed this with Jim and others, and if we can get the finalists down to, let's just say 5, and give them an opportunity to put a couple of paragraphs together and put it in front of their class, it seems like this person should be picked by their class. So the 10th graders would vote on who do they want to represent them on the school board from their class. Nobody knows the classmates better than the class itself, right? So I mean, I feel like from my perspective, that's really the only improvement that we need, is just still go through the same thing, come down with, I don't know, I'm just throwing out there 5, give them the opportunity to campaign super briefly in a paragraph, and then just facilitate a vote of the sophomore class. That's what seems reasonable to me. Jim, is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, and I don't even know 5. I mean, like I said, back when I was talking about it, it was just an idea. And I think it just came to me as we're all elected to the board. It seemed odd that the student rep would be an appointed position rather than elected by their peers. But have the same.
I think it would be an interesting tune-up to go through. So then I think I've heard 2 different things. I'm not sure what we're thinking is, would everyone who applied be on the ballot, or would the interview process help narrow it down? I'm trying to figure out what the interview process would add to it if everyone was just on the ballot, right?
Right. No, I think your second point, I think you narrow it down through the interview process. We want to make sure that you're a qualified, upstanding student. Not that you're not, but I'm just saying, yes, the interview process and the application process should narrow it down to, less than 5.
So a couple of things, just my thoughts on that is your board rep represents the school, the 9th through 12th graders. So I think 9th through 12th graders should get to vote on it.
It's actually not just 9th through 12th graders. They're supposed to represent the entire district, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I suppose, yeah. I mean, you're looking at, so maybe not your outgoing 12th graders, right? Because the student won't come down.
Rachel, the reason we thought of it that way was that most of the time seniors aren't going to know that 10th grader. Certainly 7th and 8th graders aren't going to know that 10th grader. So that's why we kind of thought we'd keep it to just the 10th grade class.
And seniors would be
most people who vote for us in the elections don't know us either, to be fair.
Was there an email
it's a little
about
bit
like,
different.
the change?
It's certainly a little bit different, Lisa.
What's that?
I was just wondering if there was an email that like had some of this stuff, because I was just being asked about it and I didn't know what was like the change that was happening.
We just
Well,
like to
it's not-
surprise you.
Not in stone, anything. We're just discussing it. So nothing's really changing unless we decide. This was just an idea.
Okay, sorry.
Corey-
I guess I must have not or missed that or something when you guys were talking. Adding that part to it. I guess I didn't mean anything by not changing anything.
Yeah, no, it's just a discussion at this point.
Yeah, John, I didn't know anything about it either. I missed last month's meeting, so.
Yeah, I missed it too, so I didn't realize we were talking about adding something.
I think it's an interesting element for sure, and definitely something that's appealing. And I do kind of, I like the element of them being elected by their peers, that they, just similar to like a student council position, and within each kind of grade, they elect, I believe, someone to represent them. Maybe that's different now. I mean, there's an element that I think it's great. It teaches them about elections and all of that piece. So I'm always for that. So.
Yeah, and
So
I'm
certainly
actually
to
not
try.
opposed, I'm actually not, I mean, this is why we're talking about this, right? But I think the idea of opening it up to the entire district is not a bad idea. If the purpose is to campaign through a paragraph or a video or whatever it is, it would kind of force everyone to get interested in the notion of, hey, there's someone in our school that's representing us on the school board. How would I potentially influence who that is, right? And it could be something fun that the elementary school goes through as well, right? As part of a process to have a little election around what that looks like. It could be educational for the entire district, not just for one class, my 2 cents, but. And then it would be less about who I like the best and maybe more, like a little bit more, less subjective in terms of like, if they didn't know the person and they were electing them just based off of the qualifications or their, if they did a video or wrote a paragraph or whatever. I don't know. There's pros and cons to both, I suppose.
I also
I can
like
go
the
either way.
idea of narrowing it down as well to maybe
Yeah.
the top 2 candidates or top 3 candidates or something.
For sure.
The only thing I would say, and I brought it up when we were at a different conference and they had specific kids up there that were handpicked to talk to the school board members at the leadership conference the one year, was that when you narrow it down to your top of the class, sometimes you miss those middle of the road kids who may relate to everybody, but they're not your straight A and B students. And that's why I was asking if grades were a part of it, because sometimes you have kids who are really bright and really smart and really good socially and understand what's going on, but they're just not that A student. And I could get behind the idea of, limiting it to 5 or limiting it to, a number like that and saying, all right, these guys made it through the process, but the grades part does worry me a little bit, because unless that standard's like a C average or whatever, you do end up missing some of those kids who just academics may not be great for them, but they're doing it and they may have a different connection or a different point of view.
I 100% agree. And I don't remember you talking about that last year, and I'm sure you did, because I went to the same panel this year at MSBA and brought up the same thing. And actually the leader was like, these kids we brought this year are not all our top students. And I agree. I think we go after those high achieving kids, but having straight A's isn't the only way to gauge whether you're high achieving, right? Some kids are just great at taking tests and others aren't. And I think we have a lot of kids that we miss when we only go after grades, or make that such a huge part of it. So I'd love to see that as well, because a lot of great kids miss opportunities because they may not be able to get straight A's.
Do we have a write-up on this?
We actually have a
Put
policy.
together some guidelines on what it should, maybe that's the thing that needs to be reviewed by all of us, or at least get our eyes on it.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
idea.
You have
Matt gave me the policy. I think it's like 215. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but I don't think I saw anything about you have to have straight A's to be considered.
No, it just sets a minimum GPA. Without looking at the policy, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a minimum of a GPA at that particular time on their transcripts, and they have to just be in good standing. They can't be in, they can't be in like ineligible for an activity and things like that. So they just, and the policy's not that long. We passed that policy well, I don't know, almost 9 years ago. And that what that would do is that we could, we'd have to change the policy in order to facilitate your ideas of, you know, exactly how do you narrow it down to a group of finalists? Do you put a number on it, or do you leave that up to the discretion of the interview committee at that particular time? But we'd have to start this process a lot sooner than we normally do. We usually do this in May and get that person chosen. So we'd have to work with the high school administration to facilitate the process as well. And again, I can put something, I've made a note to put something in writing to share with you in a future Friday or Thursday email. And then you can, you know, give feedback one way or the other just to get something in front of you. But the policy would need to be updated.
It's 2.5, just so everyone knows, that's the minimum GPA in the policy.
Is that a C?
C+.
It's not horrible. I mean, it's not asking a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
I would
much
hope-
like student council, where, you know, your representative is selected by the grade that they're in, right? I mean, there's no sense in getting too creative on this. I think that's really all we're talking about doing is inserting a very simple election process of your peers. It's the only difference.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say to the academic standing, I think it would just need to be, in my mind, consistent with academic or activity eligibility across other policies. It sounds like it is.
I think it is. I mean, I'm looking at the policy right now. It basically says that they have to meet and maintain all eligibility requirements for extracurricular activities as detailed in the handbook, which pretty much covers us.
So I can put something in writing before we even look at the policy, and you can have your, you know, you can give feedback one way or the other. It just sounds like from the conversation is you're not opposed to the concept of the election. It's just how the election is facilitated, whether it's high school, district, or just that particular grade level that I'm not necessarily hearing any consensus on. And I mean, you guys can easily take a look at what I put together and you can mark it up, punch holes in it, figure out what you think, and we can bring it back for next month as well.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
and I guess, John, now that you've had a chance to hear this dialogue, I am interested. I don't want to put you on the spot, but think a little bit about what, you know, your opinion is of that. Maybe talk to Lila a little bit too. I'd love your perspective on it.
All right. Any other discussion on that? If not, we will move forward to referendum planning discussion.
So back, I believe it was in December, I had sent you an email with my thoughts as far as the next steps with the referendum planning process. I did a bunch of research, talked to a bunch of colleagues of mine that have been in this situation before. One of the top things obviously is that districts majority of districts will facilitate and engage with a third party to do a post-election analysis. And in fact, that happened in 2011 here. So some of you remember that in 2011, Don Lifto did come back out and share information on the post-election analysis. That's something that we could start with or begin that process going. But then I did a bunch of other research and shared, and I don't need to be redundant in it. I just want to, start doing those one-on-one interviews with folks and kind of get a gauge of some specifics. We could engage with some community members regarding more in-depth look at the finances of the district, things like that. Do you want me to start moving forward in that process? Do you want me to engage with potentially Don Lifto at Baker Tilly to get started with the post-election analysis? If memory serves me right, I think he came out in April of 2011, if I'm not mistaken, maybe earlier, I'm not sure. But that was part of helping to drive the decision of what you're going to have to make here for next fall.
How does that get facilitated? Remind me again, like, do they just look at voter data or do they do interviews or like, what does that look like?
I don't think they do interviews. They just look at demographics of voter data, who did vote, who didn't vote. And what were the demographics of them, you know, male to female, parent, those types of things. I haven't talked to Don yet. I just wanted to get a little bit of a guidance from the board to move forward with that or not. But that, I can get some more specifics on what exactly the report entails. In fact,
we definitely need to do the analysis. I mean, I don't know my opinion is I don't really know any other way around it. We've got to figure out, right,
What happened?
and, you know, what do we need to do going forward? And what happened and where, right? With which demographic, right, did we lose with at the end of the day?
And I can easily share,
And
Don,
who
give me
who showed up to vote and who didn't?
right. And I can easily share a sample one from another district. Don will have those. So you can get an idea of what the report and the analysis shares.
And that cost was 3,500?
36.
36, that's close. Any other comments, guys?
This doesn't give any kind of voter history of or it's just gender and age. What does it give us? Because, I mean, looking into a crystal ball, the results are a direct correlation with how this town and county votes. It's 66 to 68% conservative. The no vote was 66%. That's pretty easy to see.
Well, I still think it would be good to look at the data, right? We can pretend we have a crystal ball and make that conclusion, but there's also a parent, non-parent dynamic that I'd be interested in understanding. How many of our parents actually voted?
I'm just curious what we get. What information do we get? Do we get that kind of detail? Because if that's like, I would love that detail too, but I'm curious what we get from it.
Yep, and I'll share one Thursday in the Thursday email.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure we get good value. Like, what are we going to do? And I think, Lisa, you bring up a great point of how we would use that. It wouldn't necessarily change what we do, but how we target our community with terms of messages and information, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to tell us, you know, it was the amount or it was the timing or it was whatever, right? But it will tell us who showed up to vote at the end of the day. And I think that can be an interesting dynamic, especially as we think about a communication strategy, which, you know, I think was lacking last time around, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know that we intentionally did a bit more of a grassroots attempt to try to track people down, but we didn't have a lot of energy behind it. I don't think there was a lot of effort behind it. And so if we need to do some more targeted messaging next time, it would help us understand who to focus on.
Yeah. Matt, I think interviews with community members would be very valuable, and maybe not even some of the traditional, like some of the people that were very active on some of the social media pages and whatnot, reaching out to them to say, like, what was this information that you felt like you needed from us that you weren't getting? Like, some of that I think would be interesting. And I think you said we maybe would potentially divide and conquer on that. So yeah, I think that could be an important element as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any
there's
other thoughts?
certainly an element of voice of the customer that I think we could learn a lot from here, and how we decide to do those interviews or those surveys or whatever it might look like to help us understand, you know, what the issue is.
And I think getting an understanding of what they understand about the district too is going to be important. And that understanding of really where they think the district's financial position is, because as I talk to people, they think a lot of that referendum money is sitting in a bank account somewhere and that we can pull from that. And there isn't this understanding that it was for buildings, it was put into buildings, and there's not just a slush fund sitting to the side. And then how we manage our financials and letting them understand, you know, how certain things are paid for and what are restricted funds. And I think when people start to understand how the district operates, they'll understand that we're not out there throwing money away. We're doing the best we can with what we've got.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure we drove home this is not a bond, this is a referendum. If they didn't hear us last year, I don't know why they'll hear us this year.
But we didn't have a lot of people showing up either, right? We had 5, 6 people at the forums. I don't know how many online, but somehow we have to be able to get that message out.
Yeah, and maybe it loosens up more with, people seem to be going out more, getting out of their houses more. Yeah, we'll see. I'm.
See where we're at.
Yep.
All right. Any other thoughts on that? In that case, we'll go to the 22-23 calendar.
I did, last week, the calendar committee met and came to a consensus in that meeting of a version of a calendar for the next school year. I did share that with you in my Thursday email from last week. Just wanted to make sure that if you had any questions, a couple of changes that the committee made is they moved spring break to the first week in April to encompass that with the Easter holiday. That saves you a day, but we also moved, you'll notice in February, the President's Day, we usually have a workshop that day. We moved that to Monday, November 7th. Those of you that have been around for a while, we used to have a workshop day in November around that time period between the first and second quarter. And then we did keep the workshop day on Martin Luther King Day. At one time, we were looking at proposing to make it a teacher work day on the 22nd of December, and the committee did not like that idea. But everything else is predominantly the same, the other months in the calendar. They just needed to, they felt that it was important to have President's Day as a little bit of a break because it's a long haul between January and April.
Any thoughts on the calendar, guys?
Mostly
No,
looks pretty standard to me. I've been on this committee a couple of times. I didn't see a lot of surprises or uniqueness here. Matt, did you?
No, not at all. In fact, what was really good is it was about a 45-minute meeting, and I had sent them out before the meeting 2 versions just to kind of take a look at. One was a little bit more, much more similar to this year. And then this version 2, which is basically where they landed on. I mean, it's a nice calendar. It works out pretty well. The only thing that surprised me was, especially the elementary, they were adamant about having the 22nd off. That was a strong recommendation not to have school or a workshop day on the 22nd of December. But other than that, it looks pretty good.
Is Easter on the 9th? Is that why it's so late?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only thing that surprised me. I don't think I've ever seen spring break that late before. If it's because of Easter, I guess it makes sense. I know for a while, it seems like the feedback from the teachers were that they liked an earlier spring break because of the timing with testing. So that's another reason why I was surprised. It's been drifting back more towards that late March, right? Like the last 2 years. And so that obviously that didn't work out to have it earlier in March for whatever reason when we did it that way.
Yeah, you're right, Lisa. We did talk about that, the timing with MCA testing, and they just opted to keep it there because you gained a day because we've traditionally always had Good Friday off on the 7th anyways. So the teachers from all 3 buildings felt that, you know what, we'll have our kids ready by that time anyways for the MCAs.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys? Sounds good. Moving on, COVID update from Matt.
This won't take too long. We're obviously in higher percentages. As you well know, we're all in the substantial level of the decision-making matrix. I could tell you that, well, the high school is about a week ahead of the elementary and the intermediate and the community ed building. And I could tell you at least from preliminary, now this is just preliminary because we'll take our first real look at the high school come this Thursday, but the numbers have been trending lower. So I don't know if it'll be enough to bring the 14-day case rate below the 3% threshold, although they weren't that, I mean, the high school was the highest. I think they're at 3.8, but statistically, it takes a few days to get lower numbers and lower percentages to get into the average of the 14 days. So it may be this Thursday that it hits the 14 days and we're below that 3% threshold, or we might just need another week. And we'll look at it every Thursday of every week. And then the following week will be the rest of the 3 buildings. So as far as I know, I think the only building that stayed the same with numbers right now is the intermediate. But the high school, if they're the trendsetter because they're a week ahead, it just seems that that's there. But again, I want to caution everybody, that's just now. It hasn't been that many days, but at least the first handful of days that the high school's been under the requirement, it's been trending lower.
How are students doing? Are we having a lot of pushback? Are they?
You know, I just looked at numbers and, you know, I think at the high school, you know, we kind of announced that Thursday, like last week, there was already a huge majority of students that were masking up right away on Friday, even though we weren't, you know, policing it until the following Monday. You know, there's some reminders to pull it up above the nose and things like that, but for the most part, they're doing pretty well. Last count at the high school, I believe I have 5 to 6 students that are voluntarily quarantining instead of wearing a mask. And I think it's around 7 students in each of the elementary and intermediate. So pretty reasonable numbers, not as I was anticipating more, but you know, I think what's happened is people think hopefully this is a temporary requirement and we can get ourselves in a better shape. The district community is trending a little lower last month or last week's reporting period. It's still really high, but it's coming down. So maybe we've hit our peak, but most of the students are, you know, they're rolling with it and they're here.
Any other questions, guys, for Matt? All right, this is gonna be quick. Policy updates.
Yeah, I shared that there are 3 policies that require 2 reads for substantive changes. The first one is policy 102, and this is equal educational opportunity. And it basically just updates the language under Article 2, Section B, and just changes some adds some verbiage in there and removes a part of a sentence in that first sentence where it says the school district prohibits harassment and discrimination, and added discrimination of any individual for any of the categories based on any of the protected classifications. So it just adds that whole groupings to the protective classifications. And then under Article 2, Section C is a brand new section and talks about the school district prohibits discrimination of students with a disability within the intent of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. These are Section 504s who need services, accommodations, or programs in order to receive a free, appropriate public education. For information as to protections that may apply pursuant to Section 504 and the school district's corresponding procedures for addressing disability discrimination complaints, refer to the school district's policy on student disabilities, non-discrimination policy 521. So they, even with the protected class, they added to the equal education opportunities to students that might be under a 504 plan. And then they did add one more section under that article, and it states that the school district prohibits sexual harassment, discrimination of any individual on the basis of sex in its educational programs or activities. For information as to the protections that apply pursuant to Title IX and the school district's corresponding procedures and processes for addressing sexual harassment and discrimination, refer to the policy on Title IX, Sex Non-Discrimination Policy 522. So it's just added a few more classifications of where this policy would be updated.
I think it's missing a word.
Oh,
It should say sexual harassment and discrimination because the way it reads means that you can't discriminate who you sexually harass.
on that.
On D.
On D. Paul, could you take a peek at that and we'll make sure it's updated?
But it's
Yep,
just
will
the word
do.
and is missing there and it's vital.
Okay. We'll
Any
take a
other
peek.
questions, guys? All right,
The next policy is policy 104, which is school district mission statement. All we did is update our mission statement. From the last time we went through this process, we updated and redrafted our mission statement a little bit. So it's been changed to systemic growth toward educational excellence for every learner. That's the only change in there, but it's substantive change.
And the next one.
And policy 623 is the mandatory summer school instruction. All this was really is we changed the grade levels in Article 3 under procedures, subsection 1 and 2, and then also subsection 4 by the end of 3rd grade instead of 2nd grade, because that aligns with the state standards. And then we took out the notes under the mandatory summer school instruction part 4. And those are the 3 policies that you have up for a 2-read.
So it says mandatory, but parents actually have the choice, right?
They do.
Okay. I was like, I didn't see where they didn't in there, but
No, they have, the mandatory piece is that we need to offer.
we mandatory offer and they may come.
They may.
And any other questions for that policy? All right. Moving on, committee updates.
I just left again. If John, or I don't know if Lila was able to join yet, I don't think so. Any updates from, or do you want to wait until the report? But I don't think there were any other committees to update at this point in time.
Oh, I'll just kind of give the general report during the main part of the meeting. And Lila is not able to make it tonight. She had some other stuff going on tonight.
Okay,
So flying solo tonight.
all right.
Is there anything else anybody else wanted to discuss? We have that 5-minute opening there.
Yeah, just briefly, I was gonna see if anybody had any questions on the negotiations. I know they still have to be approved, but I just wanted to make a comment. These negotiations go sometimes better than others, and obviously we can't get into deep detail here, but just kind of an attaboy to the people from the committee, the board reps, and then also from the teachers. I just thought it was a really good collaborative process that didn't get way down to the weeds and didn't get all hung up, and there was not a lot of anxiety. And I think what that shows for me is that people really understand the situation that we're in here this year. We ran into a buzzsaw with the insurance, but we made the most out of doing what we can for the teachers after a year that they have really worked their tail off, and just kind of wanted to publicly make those comments.
I think it's been one of those years where those of you guys that are on that negotiations team did a good job of recognizing what this year has been like for our staff and taking that into consideration. We're able to wrap that up and move things forward, take one more thing off their plate.
Right.
Yep, and I believe they are doing some informational meetings regarding the tentative agreement that we have with teacher groups this week. And so, and then they'll facilitate a vote, and then potentially we could look at the February school board meeting, having that contract being ratified by the school board.
And then any comments on that from anyone? Otherwise, I'm going to change the subject real quick. Regarding the TAC membership and structure, I see it in your note, Matt. Are we going to discuss that tonight during Eric's presentation, or is it not in need of much discussion?
Eric could potentially share. The big point of that is that he's not asking for any board action right now. He's gonna, and he can share that in his board update during the business portion of the meeting.
Okay, that works.
And then I didn't even bring this up to Matt, but at the leadership conference, I was in the board chair meeting, and there was something that they were doing in a lot of districts that actually was kind of appealing. They moved public comment to the first part of their open meeting part. So like we would come out of this and we do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then you would move into public comment. And I don't know if that's appealing to us as a board or not, but it was something I was going to talk to you about and talk to other board members about, is instead of going through a few things and then having people talk and then walk out, it would be at the beginning, and then you would continue with the regular business of the board following that. And so it's just something to think about, not something to broach tonight, but just a thought that had come up with a bunch of districts. And I was like, that's not a horrible idea.
Rachel, how did that come up? How did you understand that?
So it came up because they were talking about tension in different districts at board meetings and how districts were dealing with it. And some of the conversation revolved around like, how were they limiting conversation? Districts that were limiting how long they could talk or who could talk were saying that they were seeing a continual increase in the number of people showing up and being frustrated. Districts similar to ours who have allowed that kind of that open comment have really seen kind of what we've seen. Like we went through a high rate of people coming and it's calmed down quite a bit. A lot of the other districts that were talking about having those 3 minutes are still having security at their meetings. But they said that it was easier to have everybody do it at the beginning. And then once everybody left, security was able to leave and they were able to go on with their regular business. And it took some of the tension out of the meeting of wondering, well, why are they there? What are they upset about? And that thought process they were having while other people were presenting. So by having it at the beginning, you know exactly what's going on in the audience. And then those who choose to stay can stay and talk afterwards or whatnot. But they said it helped to alleviate some of that stress in the meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't think we're married to doing it the other way, or are we? We don't.
I would
put
just
it
add
anywhere.
2 cents that if we'd have it at the very end, it's very possible that these questions are answered during the meeting instead of just coming up without having any knowledge of what's going to be discussed. And it's possible they won't need to come up because their questions have been answered by the time public comment happens. But that's just a thought as well.
It's completely up to the board's discretion. I can continue the conversation with the board chair and vice chair on the order of the agenda. That's at the discretion of the school board. You can reorder your agenda. It's not set in stone. We can move it to the front. You can move it to the back. I think to the back, some public members might not appreciate it because it's at the very end and they're waiting all that time period, or they don't know exactly when. Now they know to come right at 7 o'clock because it's close to that time period and they can do that. But
Or you may have people walking in at 7:30 while someone's presenting and trying to go through to make sure they don't miss it, but they don't want to sit here through the first half hour. I could see it either way. I just wanted to throw it out there and kind of get your guys' thoughts. It's your meeting. And talk with you about it. And I should have the other day, but it didn't even pop into my mind.
no, that's fine. We can try it. We can try it on the front end for a couple of meetings and see how it rolls. And if it doesn't, we can always reevaluate it down the road, but I can broach it with Amy and Rachel if the board's okay with that.
Lisa, do you have a thought?
I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I don't necessarily think that the way we have it is creating any additional anxiety or issues. But if we feel like we want to try it just to try it, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't think it's necessarily creating any undue stress or issues in today's environment, but that's neither here nor there, I guess.
I didn't think it was creating issues right now. I just thought it might be easier to allow them to talk. And then if they're going to choose to leave before everybody else starts presenting.
Yeah,
Any
typically the only thing they listen through is the whatever we have at the beginning, right? It's right
Yeah.
after that, right after the consent agenda, so.
Any other thoughts or things you guys want to discuss? I know we have 5 minutes for that.
I'm still curious, and I think we talked about it during our kind of development session as the board when we were kind of in retreat, is making a part of the agenda to be just a discussion to talk about the themes from the previous month's public comment. I'm still very interested in that. So I think we just would have to figure out where that makes the most sense in the work session or as some standing element to the board meeting. I really like that idea. So I'd like to see us explore that further.
I forgot about that, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think we talked about adding that to work sessions starting in 2022, so that'd be a good thing to see.
Again, just focusing on themes, necessarily not like,
Specifics, yeah. All right, something to add in. Any other thoughts, guys? If not, I'll take a motion to recess.
A motion.
Lisa, motions and a second.
Second.
We don't have to roll call vote this, right? We can just say we're in recess.
Correct.
I think we're okay. We
We
can,
are recessed. We will see you guys back at 7 o'clock.
Right.
That might be my husband. I told him to bring me a drink. Oh, nope, it's not mine. It's somebody else's children.